Claire Whitmore's company truck died on a deserted county road with no signal and a critical board meeting 40 minutes away. That's when 10-year-old Zuri Carter pedaled past and said 5 words that would change everything. "I don't have money, but I can fix it." What the billionaire didn't know was that this quiet black girl with grease-stained hands could hear machines like music and see patterns that trained engineers missed. And what neither of them knew was that fixing one broken engine would expose a corporate conspiracy so dangerous that powerful men would stop at nothing to bury the truth, even if it meant crossing a line no one should ever cross with a child. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The truck died with a shudder and a cough, right where the county road turned to gravel and the cell towers gave up trying. Claire Whitmore sat behind the wheel, fingers tight on the rim, watching the temperature gauge climb into the red. She'd sent her driver ahead an hour ago to prep the plant tour, thinking she could handle the last 5 miles herself. Thinking wrong. She stepped out into the afternoon heat, the kind that made asphalt shimmer and turned patience into steam. Her heels crunched on the shoulder as she popped the hood. A wall of hot metal breath hit her face. Somewhere inside that tangle of hoses and wires, something had given up. She checked her phone. No signal. 40 minutes until the board call. A recall rumor was already circulating, and she needed to be the first voice they heard, not the last. Claire pressed her palms against the fender and breathed through her nose. She'd built an empire on precision, on systems that didn't fail. And here she was, stranded on a back road in a company truck that had betrayed her for the cameras. That's when she heard the bike chain clicking. A girl pedaled toward her, small and steady, with a milk crate bungee corded to the back of her bike. The crate rattled with metal pieces, old bolts, a coil of wire. The girl was maybe 10, her hair pulled back in 2 puffs, her hands stained dark with grease that soap had given up on. She wore a faded t-shirt that said Cruise Auto in cracked letters. The girl slowed as she passed, then stopped. She put one foot down on the gravel and looked at the open hood, then at Claire. "You need help?" the girl asked. Claire almost said no. Liability flashed through her mind like a warning light. So did optics. So did the reality that this child probably knew as much about engines as Claire knew about needlepoint. But the girl wasn't looking at Claire anymore. She was looking at the engine, head tilted, listening. "I don't have money," the girl said quietly, "but I can fix it." Claire blinked. "You can fix it. Maybe. Can I look?" There was no bravado in the girl's voice. No chassid. Just a simple question, the way someone might ask to borrow a pencil. Claire glanced down the empty road. No cars. No signal. No options. "Just look," Claire said. The girl leaned her bike against the truck and stepped up to the engine. She didn't touch anything at first. She just stood there, hands hovering, eyes half closed. Then she reached in and tapped the manifold with one knuckle. She leaned closer, sniffing near a cluster of wires. Her nose wrinkled. "It's not the coolant," the girl said. "It's the wiring harness. Behind that heat shield." Claire looked where the girl pointed. "How do you know?" "Smells like burnt plastic. And the idle sounds wrong. Like it's choking on itself." The girl pulled a small flashlight from her pocket and angled it into the gap. She made a soft sound, somewhere between a hum and a sigh. "Yeah, it's fried. The insulation melted and the wires crossed. It's trying to fire on the wrong timing." Claire felt something shift in her chest. Curiosity, maybe, or disbelief looking for a place to land. "Can you fix it?" Claire asked again. The girl chewed her lip, thinking. Then she turned to her bike and dug through the milk crate. She came back with a spool of copper wire, a soda tab, and a roll of electrical tape that looked like it had survived a war. "I can make a bypass," the girl said. "It won't be perfect, but it'll get you where you're going." Claire watched as the girl's hands moved into the engine. Small fingers, careful and sure, stripping wire with her thumbnails, threading copper through impossible gaps. She bent the soda tab into a makeshift clamp and used it to hold the bypass in place. Then she adjusted something near the throttle linkage, her wrist twisting in a way that looked like muscle memory. "My dad taught me that," the girl said softly, not looking up. "The throttle trick. He said engines talk if you listen long enough." Claire found herself kneeling beside the girl, ignoring the dust on her slacks. What's your name? Zuri. Zuri what? Carter. I'm Claire. Zuri glanced at her, quick and careful. I know. Your name's on the building. And the truck. Claire smiled despite herself. Right. Zuri finished wrapping the last piece of tape and stepped back. Try now. Claire slid into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine coughed once, twice, then caught. The idle was rough but steady. She pressed the gas pedal. The engine responded, no hesitation. She got out and stared at Zuri. How did you learn to do that? Zuri shrugged, wiping her hands on her jeans. My dad. He kept notebooks, diagrams, and stuff. He said every engine has a sound alphabet. You just have to learn the letters. Where's your dad now? Zuri looked down. He's gone. Claire felt the weight of that sentence and didn't push. She pulled her wallet from her purse and opened it. Let me pay you. Zuri shook her head. I didn't do it for money. Then why? Because you needed help. Zuri picked up her bike. But if you see Mrs. Cruz, tell her I didn't skip my chores. I was helping someone. Claire studied the girl. Pride, not greed. Responsibility, not hustle. This wasn't a child performing. This was someone who knew her value and didn't need to prove it. Get in, Claire said. Zuri hesitated. What? I'm driving you to Cruz Auto. I want to make sure Mrs. Cruz knows you were helping, not skipping. Zuri's eyes widened just a little. You don't have to. I want to. They loaded Zuri's bike into the truck bed. Zuri sat in the passenger seat, small and quiet, hands folded in her lap. As they drove, Claire noticed Zuri's eyes drifting over the dashboard, the console, the aftermarket parts someone had installed. This truck's nice, Zuri said carefully. But Zuri pointed at a wire running under the dash. That harness gauge is wrong. Whoever installed it cut corners. It'll work fine until it doesn't. Claire's jaw tightened. What do you mean? The wire's too thin for the load. It'll heat up over time. Maybe not today. Maybe not next week. But eventually it'll fray. Just like the one I fixed. Claire filed that information away, a cold little seed of suspicion taking root. Cruz Auto sat at the edge of town, a low brick building with a gravel lot full of gutted cars and rust-patient parts. The sign out front flickered. Inside, the air smelled like oil and coffee. A woman in coveralls looked up from a workbench, her face creased with years of sun and work. Zuri, the woman said. You're late. I'm sorry, Mrs. Cruz. I stopped to help someone. Marta Cruz looked at Claire, then at the truck outside, then back at Zuri. You fix her truck. Just a bypass. Temporary. Marta wiped her hands on a rag and walked over. She looked Claire up and down, not unkind, just measuring. She tell you how she learned? Her father, Claire said. Marta nodded. Tarek. Best ear I ever met. Kids got the same gift. She hears engines like sheet music. Claire extended her hand. Claire Whitmore. Marta shook it, her grip solid. I know who you are. You build the electric trucks everyone's talking about. We try. Zuri here could probably build them better. Zuri looked embarrassed. Mrs. Cruz. It's true. Marta turned to Claire. She rebuilt a hybrid inverter last month. From scrap. No manual. Just intuition and her dad's notebooks. Claire felt that shift again, curiosity turning into something sharper. Professional interest. She reached in her purse and pulled out a business card. She handed it to Zuri. If you ever want a tour of our plant, Claire said, call me. Only if you want to. No pressure. Zuri took the card like it might vanish if she held it too tight. Okay. Claire bent down, eye level. Thank you, Zuri. You saved me today. Zuri nodded, solemn. You're welcome. Claire drove away, the engine still purring with Zuri's makeshift fix. She made it to the board call with 3 minutes to spare, her voice steady as she navigated the recall rumors and reassured the directors. But her mind kept circling back to the girl with grease on her hands and genius in her fingertips. Back at Cruz Auto, Zuri stood in the lot, watching the truck disappear. She looked down at the business card in her hand, then at the engine she just saved. Something about it nagged at her. She walked over to the truck's parking spot and crouched down, studying the oil stain on the gravel. Then she remembered the manufacturer's seal on the faulty harness. She'd seen it while she was working, barely registered it in the moment. Rentec Components. Zuri frowned. She didn't know why that name made her uneasy, but her dad had taught her to trust her instincts. and something about that seal felt wrong. She pocketed the card and headed inside to finish her chores, the name Rentec echoing in her mind like a warning she couldn't quite hear yet. 3 days after the roadside repair, Claire stood in her office on the top floor of Whitmore Dynamics, staring at the business card she'd given Zuri. She'd tucked a duplicate in her desk drawer, a strange little insurance policy she couldn't explain. Below, the factory hummed with the organized chaos of production. Battery assemblies rolled down lines. Robots torqued bolts with inhuman precision. Everything moved like clockwork. Except it wasn't. Not really. The recall rumors hadn't disappeared. They'd multiplied. Scattered complaints about thermal spikes in the new EV line. Nothing catastrophic yet, but enough to make the safety engineers nervous and the lawyers louder. Claire picked up her phone and called Zuri's number. The line rang 4 times before a woman answered, voice cautious. Hello. This is Claire Whitmore. I'm looking for Zuri Carter. A pause. This is her aunt, Nyla. What's this about? I'd like to invite Zuri and you to tour our plant. This weekend, if you're available. No cámaras. No reporters. Just a look around. Another pause. Why? Because your niece is a gift I'd like to understand better. Nyla's voice softened just a little. I'll ask her. Saturday morning arrived cool and clear. Zuri and Nyla stood at the plant gate, visitor badges clipped to their shirts. Jace Nolan, head of corporate security, met them with a firm handshake and a tight smile. He was a man built from suspicion and protocol, and everything about him said he'd rather be anywhere else. Mrs. Carter, Zuri, follow me, please. They walked through the main assembly floor, past rows of workers in clean suits and safety glasses. Zuri's eyes went everywhere at once, absorbing the machinery, the rhythm, the sounds. Claire joined them at the mezzanine overlooking the battery line. Impressive, Nyla said quietly. Claire nodded. We're proud of it. Zuri walked to the railing and closed her eyes. The adults exchanged glances. Then Zuri's head tilted, and she pointed down at a workstation near the back of the line. That robot's wrong, Zuri said. Jace frowned. Excuse me. The one tightening the harness connectors. The torque's off. It's making a chatter sound. It'll nick the insulation. Jace looked at Claire. Claire looked at Zuri. You can hear that from up here? It's not loud, but it's there. Jace pulled out his radio. Station 12. Run a diagnostic on the torque unit. A tech's voice crackled back. Copy. They waited. 30 seconds later, the tech returned. Yeah. Torque wrench is 0.3 over spec. It's been nicking the casing. How did you? Jace clicked off the radio and stared at Zuri. Lucky guess. Zuri shook her head. Not luck. Sound. Claire felt a chill run through her. Not fear. Excitement. This wasn't a fluke. This was real. In the boardroom, 3 floors up, the mood was less optimistic. Owen Hale sat at the head of the table, his posture relaxed, his voice smooth as polished steel. Around him, the directors shuffled papers and sipped coffee, their faces tight with worry. We've got 18 reported incidents, Owen said. Thermal spikes in the charging cycle. No fires, no injuries, but enough to spook the market. What's the root cause? Claire asked. Still investigating, but the data suggests user error. People overcharging, ignoring the warnings. That's not good enough. Owen smiled, patient. Claire, if we recall every unit over 18 complaints, we tank the stock and admit liability we don't have. We have a responsibility to our shareholders, who expect us to manage risk, not amplify it. Claire's knuckles went white on the table. Run a full audit on the Rentec harness line. Today. Owen's smile thinned. That's expensive. Do it. Back in the lab, Zuri stood at a whiteboard, marker in hand. Claire had asked her to sketch what she thought the harness should look like. Zuri drew quickly, her lines confident. She routed the wiring in a different pattern, away from the heat sources with fewer sharp bends. Why this way? Claire asked. Because electricity moves like water. If you make it turn too fast, it heats up. If you keep it smooth, it stays cool. Claire stared at the diagram. It was simpler than the current design. Elegant, even, and it made perfect sense. Where did you learn this? Zuri hesitated. My dad's notebooks. He used to draw stuff like this all the time. Do you still have them? Some. One page got torn out. I don't know where it went. Claire filed that away. Another piece of the puzzle she didn't understand yet. Jace found her an hour later, his face grim. He closed the office door and dropped a folder on her desk. You're not going to like this. Tell me. Rentec's quality metrics. They're perfect. Too perfect. Every batch tests clean, 0 defect rate, clockwork consistency. It's statistically impossible. Meaning someone's cooking the numbers. Claire opened the folder and scanned the data. Jace was right. The curve was too smooth, too consistent. Real manufacturing had variation. This looked like someone had drawn a line with a ruler and called it good enough. Who audits these reports? Claire asked. Owen's team. Claire closed the folder. Keep digging. Quietly. That evening, Zuri sat in Marta's garage, a lamp pooling light over the workbench. Marta was elbow-deep in a transmission, but her eyes kept flicking to Zuri. You okay, kid? Yeah. You don't look okay. Zuri set down the socket wrench. Mrs. Cruz, do you think Claire's using me? Marta straightened, wiping her hands. What makes you ask that? Everyone at school says rich people only care about rich people, but they'll smile at you and then forget your name. Marta pulled up a stool and sat down. Most people, sure, but I watched Claire look at you. She didn't see a photo op. She saw a person. How do you know? Because I've seen the other kind. The ones who show up here asking for stories they can sell. Claire didn't do that. She asked what you wanted. Zuri considered this. I want to finish what my dad started. Then do it. And if she gets in the way, I'll run her off myself. Zuri smiled, small but real. At home that night, Zuri pulled the battered notebook from under her bed. She flipped to the torn page, running her fingers over the ragged edge. Page 42. She'd looked at it 100 times, trying to imagine what had been there. Then she remembered. The salvage junction box at Cruz. The one with the inventory number stamped on the side. She grabbed her phone and texted Marta. Can I come by tomorrow? Need to check something. Marta replied immediately. Doors open. Sunday morning, Zuri stood in the salvage yard, hands on the junction box. The stamp was faded, but readable. Number 42. She pried open the casing, and inside, etched in tiny letters on the metal, were initials. TCWD. Zuri Carter to Whitmore Dynamics. Her dad had been here. He'd pitched something to Claire's company. Zuri's heart hammered her chest. She took a photo and sent it to Claire with a single message. Did you know my dad? Across town, Claire's phone buzzed. She looked at the photo, then at the initials, and felt the air leave her lungs. She opened her laptop and started searching through old emails, going back years, hunting for the name Zuri Carter. She found it buried in a folder from 4 years ago. A meeting request. Subject line, safer harness design. The email had been auto-replied by a junior executive, a man who'd worked under Owen and left 6 months later. To join Rentec. Claire's blood went cold. She called Zuri immediately. The girl answered on the first ring. Did you find something? Zuri asked. Maybe. Can we meet? When? Now. They met at Cruz Auto. The garage closed for the weekend. Claire brought the email. Zuri brought the notebook. They sat at the workbench, pages and printouts spread between them. Your dad wanted to meet with us, Claire said gently. He had an idea for a safer harness design, but someone turned him away. Zuri stared at the email. Who? A man named Owen Hale. Does he still work for you? Claire nodded, feeling the weight of that admission. He's my CFO. Zuri's face went hard. Did he steal my dad's design? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. Zuri looked up, and her eyes were fierce. I want to finish it, the design, and I want to license it to you. Not give it away. License it. Claire blinked. You understand what that means? My dad taught me. You pay for the right to use it, and I keep the ownership. Claire smiled, a real one. Then we'll do it your way. Monday morning, Silas Run appeared at the plant gates. He was tall, silver-haired, and moved like a man who'd never been told no. He brought flowers for the receptionist and compliments for the engineers. He found Claire in her office, door open, and knocked anyway. Claire, got a minute? Silas, I don't recall scheduling a meeting. He smiled. Just wanted to check in. Make sure everything's smooth between our teams. Why wouldn't it be? Oh, I don't know. Rumors of audits. Questions about quality control. You know how the rumor mill works. Claire met his eyes. If our standards aren't being met, we'll address it. Silas's smile didn't waver. Of course. But Claire, a word of advice. Break the contract, and your pipeline dries up. We're the only supplier who can hit your volume. You know that. Is that a threat? Just business. He tipped an invisible hat. Take care now. Jace escorted him out, his hand never far from his radio. When Silas's car disappeared down the road, Jace turned to Claire. He knows we're looking. Good, Claire said. Let him sweat. That night, in Marta's closed garage, Claire and Zuri worked by lamplight. A hand-picked engineer named Sam Davis joined them, young and sharp-eyed. Together, they built a bench prototype of Tarek's resonant loop design. Wires snaked across the table. Solder smoke curled toward the ceiling. Zuri tightened the last connection and stepped back. Try it. Sam powered the circuit and aimed a heat gun at the harness. They watched the temperature gauge. It climbed slowly, then plateaued. On the control harness, the Rentec model, the temperature spiked hard and fast. It works, Sam whispered. Zuri grinned. Claire squeezed her shoulder. Then headlights swept across the garage windows. A car idled outside, engine low and patient. Marta killed the lights. They waited, breath held, until the car finally pulled away. Jace texted Claire an hour later. We need to talk. Tomorrow. Private. They met in a conference room at dawn. The building's still empty. Jace slid a file across the table. Claire opened it. Inside was a provisional patent filing. 2 years old. The diagram matched Tarek's design almost exactly. The filing company was Rentec, and the listed technical contributor was a man named Derek Pullman, Owen's former analyst. Claire's hand shook as she closed the file. They stole it. On paper, Jace said. Now we prove it. Claire looked out the window at the factory below. The machines hummed, oblivious. But she could feel the current shifting. The truth was coming, whether anyone was ready for it or not. The video leaked on a Tuesday morning. Someone in the plant had filmed Zuri sketching at the whiteboard, her small hand tracing confident lines while engineers watched with crossed arms and curious eyes. By noon, the clip had 500,000 views. By evening, it was everywhere. Car whisperer, 10-year-old genius saves billionaire CEO. Meet Zuri Carter, the girl who speaks engine. Child prodigy exposes flaws in electric vehicle giant. The headlines multiplied like viruses. Claire watched them scroll across her monitor, each one making her stomach tighten. This was exactly what she'd feared. Zuri wasn't a story. She was a person, and now the internet had turned her into content. At Cruise Auto, reporters gathered like crows. They knocked on the garage door, called Marta's phone, left business cards wedged in the doorframe. Marta shooed them away with a wrench in one hand and threats in the other. But they kept coming back. Inside, Nyla sat at the workbench, head in her hands. This is too much. She's 10 years old. Zuri stood near the window, peeking through the blinds at the cameras outside. I didn't ask for this. I know, baby. But it's happening anyway. Marta locked the door and pulled down the shades. They'll get bored. They always do. But Nyla shook her head. Not this time. They smell a story. And they're not leaving until they get it. At Whitmore Dynamics, the board convened an emergency session. Owen stood at the head of the conference table, tablet in hand, charts projected on the wall behind him. The stock price graph looked like a roller coaster designed by pessimists. Gentlemen, ladies, we have an opportunity here, Owen said smoothly. The girl's viral. People love her. We bring her in for a press conference, put her on stage with Claire, show the world that Whitmore Dynamics invests in young talent. The stock rebounds, the recall story gets buried, everyone wins. Claire sat at the far end of the table, arms folded. No, Owen's smile didn't falter. I'm sorry. We're not using her. Claire, with respect, we're not using her. We're celebrating her. Behind cameras? With our logo in the background? That's using her. One of the directors leaned forward. Claire, the optics are bad right now. We need a win. Then we win by fixing the actual problem, not by parading a child in front of reporters. Owen set down his tablet. The actual problem is a perception issue. And perception is reality in our business. Claire stood. I'm announcing an internal audit. Full review of the Rentec supply line. And we're halting new orders until we have answers. The room went silent. Owen's smile finally cracked. That's a $2 million decision. It's the right decision. The board should vote. I'm not asking for a vote. I'm telling you what's happening. Claire walked out, leaving Owen standing at the head of the table, his jaw tight and his eyes calculating. That afternoon, a courier arrived at Cruz Auto. Marta signed for the package and brought it inside. The return address said Rentec Components. Inside was a glossy folder, embossed letters, and a scholarship offer made out to Zuri Carter. Full ride to the Pemberton Academy for gifted youth. Room, board, tuition, and a summer internship at Rentec's Innovation Lab. All expenses covered. Nyla read it twice, her hands shaking. This is a lot of money. Marta looked at Zuri. What do you think? Zuri stared at the folder. The photos showed kids in clean uniforms working in bright labs with new equipment. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. Why would they give this to me? Zuri asked. Because you're brilliant, Nyla said. Or because they want something, Marta said quietly. Zuri thought about the Rentec seal on the faulty harness. She thought about her dad's torn notebook page and the stolen patent filing. She thought about Silas Wren's smile when he'd visited the plant, smooth and empty as glass. I don't want it, Zuri said. Nyla blinked. Baby, this is a full scholarship. I know what it is. I don't want it. Marta smiled, proud. Good instincts, kid. Nyla folded the letter and tucked it back into the envelope. She looked at Zuri with something like awe. You're sure? I'm sure. Later that evening, Claire called. Nyla answered, her voice guarded. We got the scholarship offer, Nyla said. I heard. What did Zuri say? She said no, which meant Owen had always known. Claire called Jace immediately. Give me everything you can on Derek Pullman. Employment records, email logs, travel history. Everything. Already on it, Jace said. But Claire, if we go after Owen, the board will fight us. Let them. That evening, Claire drove to Nyla's apartment unannounced. She knocked, and Nyla opened the door surprised. Claire, what are you doing here? I need to talk to Zuri. Nyla hesitated, then let her in. Zuri sat on the couch, the notebook open in her lap. She looked up as Claire entered. I found my dad's page, Zuri said. I know. I saw. Claire sat down beside her. Zuri, I need to tell you something. Your dad came to my company 4 years ago. He had this design, and someone turned him away. Owen. Yes, Owen. Zuri's face hardened. Did he steal it? I think so, but I need to prove it. How? By finding the connection between Owen and Rentec, and by finishing what your dad started. Zuri looked down at the notebook. I want to finish it, but I want to do it right. I want to license the design, not give it away. And I want the money to go into a fund for other kids like me. Kids who fix things but don't have anyone listening. Claire felt her chest tighten. This girl, 10 years old, was thinking 3 steps ahead with more integrity than most adults Claire knew. Then that's what we'll do, Claire said. Your way. Zuri nodded. Okay. Nyla wiped her eyes from the doorway. Claire looked up and saw her, and something passed between them. Trust, maybe, or the beginning of it. The next morning, Claire held a press conference. No Zuri, no photo ops, just Claire at a podium, cameras rolling, and a prepared statement that made the legal team sweat. Whitmore Dynamics is committed to transparency and safety. We are conducting a full internal review of our supplier relationships, specifically with Rentec Components. Until that review is complete, we are suspending all new orders. We are also establishing the Carter Innovation Fund, named in honor of Tara Carter, a talented engineer whose ideas deserve recognition. This fund will support young inventors and ensure that innovation is rewarded, not buried. The room erupted with questions. Claire ignored them and walked off the stage. Owen found her in the hallway, his face red. You just torpedoed our supply chain. I protected our integrity. The board will have your head. Let them try. Owen stepped closer, his voice dropping. You think you're untouchable because people like you. But corporations don't run on sentiment, Claire. They run on numbers. And your numbers just went off a cliff. Claire met his eyes. Then I'll climb back up. Without you. Owen's face went pale. What's that supposed to mean? It means I know about Derek Pullman. I know about the patent filing. And I know you met with Tara Carter 4 years ago. Owen's mask slipped, just for a second, but it was enough. You can't prove that, he said. Not yet, but I will. Claire walked away, leaving Owen standing in the hallway, the walls closing in around him. That night, Zuri couldn't sleep again. She sat on her porch, looking at the stars, thinking about her dad. She wondered if he'd known that his design would matter this much. She wondered if he'd been scared when he walked into that meeting with Owen. Her phone buzzed. A text from Claire. You okay? Zuri typed back. Yeah, just thinking. About what? About how my dad was brave. And how I want to be brave too. You already are. Zuri smiled and put the phone down. The night was quiet except for the hum of power lines overhead. She listened to the sound, the way her dad had taught her, and heard the harmony hidden inside the noise. Somewhere in that hum was the future. And for the first time, Zuri wasn't afraid of it. The recall announcement hit like a thunderclap. Claire stood in front of the cameras again, this time with engineers flanking her, charts on screens behind her showing thermal data and failure rates. She spoke clearly, without apology. Effective immediately, Whitmore Dynamics is issuing a voluntary recall of all Model E7 vehicles equipped with Rentec harness assemblies. We're offering free replacement installations at any authorized service center. Customer safety is our priority. We will not compromise on that. The stock price dropped 18% in the first hour. Owen stood in the back of the press room, his face carved from stone. When Claire stepped off the stage, he followed her into a side corridor. You're destroying this company, he said. I'm saving it. The board is meeting tonight. They're going to ask you to step down. Claire stopped walking and turned to face him. Let them ask. Claire, be reasonable. I'm being reasonable. What's unreasonable is selling defective parts and calling it acceptable risk. Owen's voice dropped. You think you're the hero here, but you're just reckless. And you're complicit. The word hung in the air like smoke. Owen's jaw worked, but he said nothing. He turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing down the empty hall. Across town, Silas Rinn sat in his corner office, watching the press conference on 3 monitors. He smiled, cold and satisfied, and picked up his phone. File the injunction, he told his lawyer. Whitmore's defaming a world-class partner. Let's remind them what that costs. By noon, the lawsuit was public. Rentec claimed damages for reputational harm and breach of contract. The filing included an offer. Rentec would buy out Whitmore's troubled division for $200 million, contingent on Claire stepping down as CEO. The board convened an emergency session. Claire sat at the table, calm and still, while the directors argued around her. This is a lifeline, one director said. We take the deal, stabilize the stock, and move forward. We'd be admitting guilt, another countered. We'd be admitting pragmatism. Claire waited until the room quieted. We're not taking the deal. Claire, this is bigger than pride. It's not about pride. It's about what's right. Rentec sold us faulty components. They buried the data, and now they're trying to buy their way out of accountability. If we take this deal, we're complicit. One of the older directors leaned forward. And if we don't, we might not survive. Claire met his eyes. Then we rebuild. From the ground up. The room fell silent. At Cruise Auto, Zuri sat at the workbench with her dad's notebook open in front of her. She'd been staring at the oscillograph traces for an hour, comparing them to the data Jace had sent her from the Rentec quality reports. Marta leaned over her shoulder. What are you looking at? This, Zuri said, pointing. The noise floor. See how it's exactly the same across every test? Yeah. So, it shouldn't be. Noise is random. But this isn't random. It's copied. Marta squinted. You're saying they faked the tests? I'm saying they used the same test result over and over and just changed the labels. Marta whistled low. That's fraud. Yeah. Zuri took a photo of the screen and sent it to Claire. Found something. Claire was in the middle of the board meeting when her phone buzzed. She glanced at the message, then at the photo. Her pulse quickened. Excuse me, she said, standing. I need to take this. She stepped in the hallway and called Zuri. Can you explain this to Jace? Sure. I'll have him call you in 5 minutes. Jace called exactly 5 minutes later. Zuri walked him through the data, her voice steady and precise. Jace listened, asked questions, and then said the words that made everything real. This is evidence of fraud. Corporate fraud. We can take this to the federal regulators. Zuri's hand shook. Will it help? Kid, this might save the company. That night, Jay sat in his car outside a rented warehouse on the edge of the county. He'd been tracking Rentec shipments for weeks, following the trucks, mapping the routes. And tonight, one of those trucks had pulled into this building. He texted Marta, "I'm at the warehouse. Going in." Marta texted back, "Don't be stupid. Wait for backup." But Jace was already out of the car, moving toward the loading dock. The bay door was open a crack, just enough to slip through. Inside, the space was lit by flickering fluorescents. Pallets of harness assemblies sat in neat rows, each one shrink-wrapped and labeled. Jace took photos, lot codes, serial numbers, shipping manifests taped to the sides. And then he heard a voice behind him. "You're trespassing." Jace turned. A security guard stood there, hand on his radio. "I'm investigating a safety issue," Jace said calmly. "You're leaving." Jace raised his hands. "No problem." But as he walked toward the door, he saw something that made his blood run cold. A pallet near the back, labeled for export. The lot code matched the truck Claire had driven on the day she met Zuri. He snapped one more photo and walked out. The next morning, Marta got a frantic call from Nyla. "Zuri's gone." Marta's stomach dropped. "What do you mean gone?" "She went to cruise to get her bike. She never came back." Marta ran to the garage. Zuri's bike was there. Her backpack was there. But Zuri wasn't. She called Claire immediately. "We've got a problem." Claire's voice went sharp. "What kind of problem?" "Zuri's missing." The world stopped. Claire felt her chest tighten, her vision narrow. "How long?" 2 hours. Maybe 3. "Call the police." Now. Marta already had. But the police were treating it like a runaway case, asking questions about family disputes and school problems. They weren't listening. Claire hung up and called Jace. "Drop everything. Find her." Jace pulled up the security footage from Cruise Auto. The timestamp showed Zuri arriving at 8 in the morning. At 8:15, a white van pulled up. No plates visible. 2 men got out. One of them talked to Zuri. She shook her head. The man gestured toward the van. Zuri backed away. Then the other man grabbed her. Jace's hands clenched into fists. He zoomed in on the van. No plates. But there was a logo on the side, faint and half-covered. Rentec. He forwarded the footage to Claire. They took her. Claire stared at the screen, her hands shaking. Not with fear, with rage. She called Owen. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice casual. "Claire, what can I do for you?" "Where is she?" "I am sorry." "Zuri, where is she?" Owen paused. "I have no idea what you're talking about. A Rentec van took her from Cruise Auto this morning. If you know where she is, you tell me right now." Owen's voice went cold. "I don't know anything about that. And I'd be careful about making accusations." Claire hung up and dialed Silas Wren. He answered with that smooth, empty voice. "Claire, this is unexpected. Where's Zuri Carter?" "Who?" "The girl. The 10-year-old girl your people kidnapped." Silas laughed, light and easy. "Claire, you're upset. I understand. But I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe she ran away. Kids do that." Claire's voice dropped to a whisper. "If you hurt her, I will bury you." "Careful, Claire. Threats are unbecoming." The line went dead. Claire sat in her office, the city lights blinking below. She felt helpless, powerless. And then she remembered what Zuri had said the first time they met. "I don't have money, but I can fix it." Claire picked up the phone and started making calls. Jace, Marta, every contact she had, every favor she could pull. She wasn't a vigilante, but she was done waiting for systems that didn't care. Somewhere out there, Zuri was alone, and Claire was going to bring her home. Meanwhile, in a dim workshop that smelled like oil and burnt circuits, Zuri sat on a metal chair, her hands free, her eyes sharp. 2 men stood near the door, bored and checking their phones. Through a gap in the wall, she could see crates stacked high, each one labeled with Rentec logos. She listened. Cooling fans hummed. Somewhere, a generator chugged. And beneath it all, a frequency she recognized. Zuri looked down at her shoelace, then at the maintenance console near the wall. And she started a plan. If they thought she was just a scared kid, they were wrong. She was her father's daughter. and she knew how to make broken things work. The police detective sat across from Nyla in the crew's auto office, his notepad open, his expression skeptical. He'd been asking the same questions for 20 minutes, circling around family problems and school attendance like they mattered more than the fact that a child was missing. "And you're sure she didn't just go to a friend's house?" he asked again. Nyla's voice cracked. "I'm telling you, someone took her. There's video. We'll look into it. But statistically, most missing children are runaways or custody disputes." Marta slammed her hand on the desk. "This isn't a statistic. This is Zuri Carter, and she was grabbed off my property by men in a van." The detective closed his notepad. "We'll file the report. If she doesn't turn up in 24 hours, we'll escalate." 24 hours? Nyla stood, her whole body shaking. In 24 hours, she could be anywhere. She could be... Marta caught Nyla before she collapsed, holding her up. The detective left, promising follow-up that nobody believed would come. Outside, news vans were already circling. Someone had leaked the story. Child prodigy missing. Car whisperer vanishes. The reporters shouted questions through the chain-link fence, their cameras pointed like weapons. Nyla turned to Marta, tears streaming. "This is my fault. I let her get involved. I let that woman drag her into this corporate war, and now my baby's gone." Marta held her tighter. "This isn't on you. This is on them." Inside the garage, Jace examined every inch of the space where Zuri had been taken. He found her bike, her backpack, and near the workbench, something small and deliberate. A piece of copper wire bent into a tight coil, wrapped in aluminum foil, tucked between two tools where it wouldn't be accidentally swept away. He picked it up carefully. The coil was wrapped in a specific pattern, tight and precise. He'd seen this before, in a prototype harness. The resonant loop. He photographed it and sent the image to Claire. She left a signal. Claire was in her car, driving nowhere and everywhere, her phone on speaker. When a photo came through, she pulled over and zoomed in. The coil. The pattern. It was Zuri's signature. "What does it mean?" Claire asked. "She's telling us to listen," Jace said. "To follow the frequency." Claire closed her eyes, thinking. Zuri heard engines like music. She'd found a faulty harness by listening to a hum nobody else noticed. And now she was leaving breadcrumbs in the only language she trusted. "Check the regional power grid," Claire said. "Any unusual voltage patterns. Anything that looks like interference." Jace was already pulling up his monitoring dashboard. Whitmore Dynamics tracked energy flows across the county for their charging stations. The grid was mapped in real time, a web of lines and nodes that pulsed with data. And there, in the northeast quadrant, a tiny anomaly. A voltage drop and recovery, repeating in a pattern. Not random. Deliberate. Jace's heart hammered. "I've got something." "Where?" "Old industrial park. 20 miles out, near the county line." Claire was already driving. "Send me the coordinates." Meanwhile, in the dim workshop, Zuri sat perfectly still, her mind racing. The two guards had stopped paying attention to her. One scrolled through his phone. The other leaned against the wall, half asleep. They thought she was just a scared kid waiting for whatever came next. They were wrong. She'd been watching the maintenance console for the past hour. It controlled the cooling fans, the overhead lights, and most importantly, the backup generator. The system wasn't sophisticated, just a basic panel with manual overrides and a connection to the regional grid. Zuri had already unscrewed the access plate using the bent edge of her shoelace buckle. The wires inside were old, color-coded, easy to read. She didn't need to break anything. She just needed to create a pattern. She waited until both guards were distracted, then reached into the console. She touched two wires together, just for a second. The lights flickered. The fans stuttered. The guards looked up, annoyed. "Power glitch," one of them muttered. Zuri pulled her hand back and waited. 5 minutes later, she did it again. Flicker. Stutter. The pattern was simple. 3 short pulses, 3 long, 3 short. Her dad had taught her Morse code when she was 7, using the blinker lights on his truck. SOS. She repeated it every 5 minutes, creating a voltage spike that would ripple through the grid if anyone was watching. Someone was. Jace tracked the pattern as it repeated. "She's signaling. 333. It's Morse." Claire's hands tightened on the steering wheel. She's alive, and she's telling us where she is. Claire called Marta. I need you and Nyla to meet me. Bring bolt cutters and a first aid kit. What are you doing? Marta asked. Get in her back. Nyla's voice cut in. The police said. I don't care what the police said. Claire's voice was steel. They took her because of me. I'm bringing her home. There was a pause. Then Nyla said quietly, okay. They met at a gas station 3 miles from the coordinates. Claire pulled in driving a plain sedan, nothing that would draw attention. Marta and Nyla arrived in Marta's truck, tools rattling in the bed. Jay showed up last, carrying a laptop and a camera with a telephoto lens. The signal's coming from that building, Jay said, pointing to a map on his screen. Old fabrication plant. Supposed to be abandoned, but someone's running power. Claire looked at the satellite image. Chain-link fence. Loading docks. A single-access road. We go in quiet, Claire said. No heroics. We find Zuri and we leave. Marta loaded the bolt cutters. And if someone tries to stop us, then we deal with it. Nyla looked pale, but determined. I'm coming with you. Claire started to argue, then stopped. This was Nyla's child. She had every right to be there. Stay behind me, Claire said. They drove the last 3 miles with the headlights off, parking a quarter-mile from the fence. The night was cool and clear, stars scattered overhead like broken glass. They moved through the tall grass, the only sound the whisper of wind and their own breathing. The fence was rusted but intact. Marta cut through the chain link in silence, peeling back a section just wide enough to slip through. They crossed the empty lot, staying low, using the shadows. The building loomed ahead, corrugated metal and broken windows. Light leaked from a bay door at the back. Jace crept forward and peered inside. Rows of crates, pallets of components, and in the corner, a small figure sitting in a metal chair. Jace's hand signal was clear. She's there. Claire felt relief flood through her, followed immediately by rage. Zuri looked small and fragile under the fluorescent lights, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes watching the guards with careful calculation. Claire pulled out her phone and texted Jace. Create a distraction. Jace nodded and circled around to the far side of the building. He found a breaker box and waited. On Claire's signal, he threw the main switch. The lights inside died. The fan stopped. For 3 seconds, the building was silent and dark. Then the backup generator kicked in and the lights flickered back on. But 3 seconds was enough. Claire and Marta moved through the door while the guards were still blinking and cursing. Nyla stayed outside, watching the perimeter, her phone ready to call for help if everything went wrong. Inside, Claire moved fast and low. She reached Zuri just as one of the guards turned around. Hey! Marta stepped in front of him, wrench raised. Don't! The guard froze. The second guard reached for his radio, but Jace was already there, yanking it out of his hand. Sit down, Jace said. Both of you. They sat. Claire knelt in front of Zuri, her hands shaking. Are you okay? Zuri nodded, her eyes wide. You came. Always. Claire pulled off her jacket and wrapped it around Zuri's shoulders. Can you walk? Yeah. They moved toward the door, Marta and Jace covering their exit. But as they reached the threshold, a voice echoed from the back of the warehouse. Going somewhere, Silas Wren stepped out of the shadows, flanked by 2 more men. His smile was cold and sharp. This is private property, Claire. You're trespassing. You kidnapped a child. I don't know what you're talking about. This is a corporate training facility. The girl was brought here for her own protection after making threats against Rentec personnel. That's a lie, Zuri said. Silas ignored her. You should leave now, Claire, before this becomes a legal problem for you. Claire stepped forward, putting herself between Silas and Zuri. I'm taking her home, and then I'm going to burn your company to the ground. Silas's smile widened. With what? You've got no proof. No witnesses. Just a scared billionaire playing hero. Jace held up his camera. I've got proof. Photos of your illegal export operation. Serial numbers that match vehicles involved in thermal failures. And video of your men grabbing Zuri off the street. Silas's smile finally cracked. Behind him, something sparked. One of the battery crates, stacked too close to a heat source, suddenly hissed and smoked. The smell of burning lithium filled the air. Fire! one of the guards shouted. The battery exploded in a shower of sparks. Flames licked up the side of the crate, spreading fast. The sprinkler system kicked in, but the water only made the lithium fire worse. Move! Marta grabbed Zuri and ran for the door. Claire followed, pulling Nyla inside to help. Jace covered their retreat, his camera still recording everything. They burst out into the night, lungs burning, eyes streaming. Behind them, the warehouse lit up like a torch, flames climbing through the roof vents. In the distance, sirens wailed. Zuri coughed, doubled over. Claire knelt beside her, rubbing her back. Breathe. Just breathe. Nyla dropped to her knees and pulled Zuri into her arms, sobbing. I thought I lost you. Zuri held on tight. I'm okay. Antonida. I'm okay. The fire trucks arrived minutes later, followed by police cars and news vans. The warehouse burned through the night, a beacon visible for miles. By morning, investigators were sifting through the wreckage, finding crates of counterfeit components and shipping manifests that told a story of fraud spanning years. The headlines shifted overnight. Rentec facility raided in child abduction case. Billionaire CEO rescues kidnapped prodigy. Counterfeit auto parts linked to thermal failures. In a hotel room across town, Claire sat with Zuri while Nyla slept in the next bed, finally exhausted enough to rest. Zuri was wrapped in a blanket, her hands cradling a cup of hot chocolate that Marta had brought from the vending machine. How did you signal us? Claire asked. I shorted the generator to create voltage spikes. 333. Morse code. Claire shook her head, almost laughing. You're incredible. My dad taught me. He said if you ever get lost, make noise someone can follow. He taught you well. Zuri looked up. Are they going to hurt you? For coming to get me? I don't care if they do. Ikare. Claire's throat tightened. Then I'll be careful. Zuri set down the hot chocolate and pulled something from her pocket. A small piece of wire bent into a loop. I made this while I was in there. For you. So you remember. Claire took the wire, her vision blurring. Remember what? That broken things can be fixed. If you know how to listen. Claire closed her hand around the wire and pulled Zuri into a hug. For the first time in years, she let herself cry. The morning after the rescue, the Department of Commerce opened a formal investigation. Federal agents arrived at Rentec headquarters with warrants, seizing servers and files. Silas Wren's lawyers issued statements denying everything, but the photos Jace had taken were already in the hands of prosecutors. At Whitmore Dynamics, the mood was cautious. Employees whispered in hallways. The stock price wobbled, uncertain whether to climb or fall. And in the executive conference room, the board of directors gathered for what everyone knew would be a reckoning. Claire walked in alone. No lawyers, no prepared remarks. Just her, a folder of documents, and the truth. Owen sat at the far end of the table, his face a careful blank. The other directors looked uncomfortable, their loyalty divided between self-preservation and principle. The chairwoman, a sharp-eyed woman named Margaret Voss, called the meeting to order. Claire, the board has reviewed the events of the past 72 hours. We have concerns. I'm sure you do, Claire said. You orchestrated an unauthorized rescue operation. You endangered yourself and others. You've embroiled this company in a federal investigation. I brought a kidnapped child home. You violated protocol. Claire set the folder on the table. I violated protocol to do what was right. If that's a problem, then maybe the protocol is broken. Margaret's jaw tightened. The board is considering a vote of no confidence. Claire nodded slowly. I understand. But before you vote, I want you to see something. She opened a folder and slid documents across the table. These are the oscillograph traces Zuri Carter identified. Notice the noise floor. Identical across multiple tests. Statistically impossible unless the data was fabricated. The directors leaned in, squinting at the technical readouts. This, Claire continued, is evidence that Rentec systematically falsified quality control reports. They sold us defective components, knowing they would fail. And when we discover the problem, they try to silence the person who exposed them. Owen spoke for the first time, his voice measured. Claire, you're making serious accusations without. I have proof. Claire pulled out another document. This is a provisional patent filing from Rentec, dated 2 years ago. It describes a resonant loop harness design. That design was stolen from Tara Carter, Zuri's father, after he pitched it to this company 4 years ago. She turned to Owen. You were in that meeting. You saw his design. And 6 months later, your analyst Derek Pullman left to join Rentec. 3 months after that, they filed this patent. Owen's face went pale. That's circumstantial. It's documented. Claire slid another page across. Travel logs, badge records, email metadata. You met with Tara Carter on March 14th, 4 years ago. Pullman accessed the design files that same week. And within the year, Rentec had a patent that matched Tarek's work almost exactly. The room was silent. Margaret looked at Owen. Is this true? Owen stood, his chair scraping. I don't have to sit here and be accused. Sit down, Margaret said. Her voice was quiet, but cut like wire. Owen sat. Claire continued, her voice steady. Tara Carter died in a car accident 6 months after that meeting. His brakes failed. The police ruled it mechanical failure. But his daughter found notes in his workshop. Notes that reference a follow-up meeting that never happened. The implications hung in the air, heavy and dark. I'm not saying Owen caused that accident, Claire said. But I am saying that Tarek's design was stolen. That Rentec has been selling fraudulent components. And that when a 10-year-old girl exposed the truth, they kidnapped her to protect their profits. Margaret closed her eyes. Owen, I'm suspending you pending a full internal review. Effective immediately. Owen's mask finally shattered. You're making a mistake. All of you. Claire's turned this into a crusade, and it's going to destroy us. You destroyed us, Claire said quietly. We're just cleaning up the mess. Owen stood and walked out, the door closing behind him with a soft click. The board voted. 12-2. Claire stayed. Owen was out. Across town, in the small apartment she shared with Nyla, Zuri sat on the couch watching the news. The reporters were calling her a hero. They showed footage of the burning warehouse, photos of the counterfeit components, and interviews with engineers praising her technical insight. But Zuri didn't feel like a hero. She felt tired, and angry, and confused. Nyla sat beside her, their hands linked. You okay, baby? I don't know. That's fair. Zuri turned to her aunt. Do you think my dad's accident was really an accident? Nyla's breath caught. She'd been dreading this question for years. I don't know. I wanted to believe it was. But now you're not sure. Nyla nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. Your dad was careful. He checked his brakes every week. For them to fail like that, it never made sense. Zuri looked down at her hands. If they killed him for his design, then everything I'm doing, finishing his work, it's dangerous. Yes, but it's also right. Nyla pulled Zuri close. It's right, but I'm scared. I'm so scared of losing you. You won't lose me. I'm too stubborn. Nyla laughed through her tears. You get that from your dad. That afternoon, Claire visited the apartment. She brought groceries, a box of books, and something wrapped in brown paper. Zuri opened the package carefully. Inside was a small device, beautifully machined, with her dad's initials engraved on the side. TC, what is it? Zuri asked. An oscillator. I had our engineers build it from your dad's original design. It's yours now. A prototype of the resonant loop harness. The first one that bears his name officially. Zuri turned it over in her hands, her eyes wide. It's perfect. He deserved to see this built. Since he can't, I wanted you to have it. Zuri looked up. Thank you. Claire knelt down. Zuri, the federal investigators want to interview you. They need your statement about what happened in the warehouse and about the technical fraud you uncovered. Your aunt will be with you, and so will I if you want. But I need you to know, this might get harder before it gets easier. Zuri set the oscillator down carefully. I want to do it. I want to tell them everything. You're sure? My dad couldn't finish this, but I can. Claire's chest tightened with pride and grief in equal measure. Okay, we'll do it together. The federal hearing was scheduled for the following week. In the days leading up to it, the media frenzy intensified. Reporters camped outside Crew's auto. Legal analysts debated corporate liability on cable news. And somewhere in the chaos, the The truth started to solidify into something the world could no longer ignore. Marta's garage became a refuge. She chased off reporters with a broom and threats, keeping the space clear for Zuri to work. Inside, Zuri rebuilt the oscillator from scratch, teaching herself the finer points of her dad's design. She worked with focus that bordered on meditation, her hands steady, her mind clear. Claire visited every evening, not to pressure or guide, but simply to be there. They worked in comfortable silence, passing tools, adjusting circuits, building something that mattered. One night, as they tested the oscillator's frequency output, Zuri played the recording her dad had left. His voice filled the small garage, warm and steady. "If you're hearing this, they took our idea. But ideas don't belong to thieves. They belong to the people who dream them. Protect this design, not because it's mine, but because it's right." The recording ended. Zuri wiped her eyes. "He knew," she said softly. "He knew they'd try to steal it." Claire nodded. "And he made sure you could finish it. I'm going to license it, like we talked about. And the money's going to the Carter Innovation Fund, for kids who fix things but don't have anyone listening. That's exactly what your dad would have wanted." Zuri powered down the oscillator and looked at Claire. "Do you think we'll win? Against Rentec, I think the truth is on our side. And that counts for something. But not everything. No, not everything." Claire set down her tools. "But we're going to fight anyway. Because that's what people like your dad do. They fight for what's right, even when it's hard." Zuri nodded, her jaw set with determination that looked too old for her face. "Then let's fight." The night before the hearing, Nyla tucked Zuri into bed and sat on the edge of the mattress, smoothing her niece's hair. "You don't have to do this, you know. We can walk away. Move somewhere quiet. Start over." Zuri shook her head. "I can't. Not until it's finished. You sound just like him." "Good." Nyla kissed her forehead. "I'm proud of you. Even when I'm terrified, I'm proud." "I'm scared too," Zuri admitted. "But I think that's okay. It's more than okay. It's honest." Zuri closed her eyes, and for the first time in weeks, she slept without nightmares. Across the city, in a quiet apartment that felt more like a hotel than a home, Claire sat at her kitchen table with a glass of wine she hadn't touched. She thought about the little girl who'd fixed her truck on a dusty road. The girl who'd refused money and asked for respect instead. The girl who'd been kidnapped because adults couldn't control their greed. And she thought about tomorrow, about standing in front of regulators and media and the weight of public opinion, and telling the truth no matter what it cost. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jace. "Security's in place. She'll be safe." Claire typed back, "Thank you." Another text, this time from Marta. "Kids ready. So are we." Claire set down the phone and finally took a sip of wine. Tomorrow, the world would be watching. And for the first time in her career, Claire wasn't worried about the stock price or the board's approval or her own reputation. She was worried about doing right by a 10-year-old girl who deserved better than the world had given her. And that, Claire thought, was exactly where she needed to be. The Civic Hall had been converted into a hearing room. Rows of folding chairs facing a raised platform where 3 federal regulators sat behind a long table. Cameras lined the back wall, their red lights blinking like watchful eyes. Every seat was filled. Employees from Whitmore Dynamics, workers from Cruise Auto, reporters with notebooks, lawyers in expensive suits. And in the front row, Zuri Carter sat between her Aunt Nyla and Marta, her hands folded in her lap, her father's notebook resting on her knees. Claire sat 3 seats away, close enough to offer support, but far enough to avoid the appearance of coaching. Jace stood near the exit, his eyes scanning the crowd, alert for trouble. The lead regulator, a woman named Dr. Patricia Harmon, called the hearing to order. Her voice was clear and measured, the voice of someone who'd spent years listening to corporate double talk and cutting through it. This hearing has been convened to investigate allegations of systemic safety violations, fraudulent quality reporting, and corporate misconduct related to Rentec Components and their business relationship with Whitmore Dynamics. We'll hear testimony from multiple witnesses. This is not a trial, but statements made here are under oath and subject to perjury laws. She looked directly at the cameras. Let's begin. The first witness was a Whitmore engineer who walked through the thermal failure data. explaining in careful technical language how the Rentec harnesses had shown stress patterns that shouldn't exist in properly manufactured components. Charts appeared on screens, graphs with damning curves. The engineer's testimony was dry but devastating. Next came Jace. He presented the photographs from the warehouse, each image date-stamped and geotagged. Pallets of defective harnesses labeled for export. Serial numbers that matched vehicles involved in documented failures. Shipping manifests that proved Rentec had been moving faulty product through unofficial channels. "And how did you obtain these photographs?" one of the regulators asked. "I tracked a Rentec shipment to an undisclosed facility. I entered the premises and documented what I found. Without a warrant? I'm not law enforcement. I'm corporate security conducting an investigation into threats against company personnel." The regulator made a note. The photos were marked as evidence, though their admissibility in criminal court remained questionable. Then Claire was called. She walked to the witness table, placed her hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. She spoke for 20 minutes, laying out the timeline of events. The roadside repair, Zuri's identification of the faulty harness, the decision to audit Rentec, the recall, the kidnapping. "Why did you order the recall?" Dr. Harmon asked. "Because it was the right thing to do. We had evidence of safety issue. We had a responsibility to our customers. Your CFO, Owen Hale, advised against the recall. Why did you overrule him?" "Because he was wrong, and because I suspected he had a conflict of interest." Murmurs rippled through the room. Dr. Harmon raised an eyebrow. "Explain." Claire pulled out the document she'd shown the board. 4 years ago, a man named Zuri Carter approached Whitmore Dynamics with a safer harness design. He met with Owen Hale. 6 months later, Owen's analyst, Derek Pullman, left to join Rentec. 3 months after that, Rentec filed a provisional patent for a design that matched Tarek's work. "And you believe Mr. Hale facilitated this theft?" "I believe the evidence suggests it. And I believe Zuri Carter's death shortly after that meeting deserves a closer look." The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions. The regulators called for order. Owen's lawyers jumped to their feet, objecting to the insinuation. Dr. Harmon banged her gavel. "This hearing will proceed in an orderly fashion, or I'll clear the room." The noise died down. "Ms. Whitmore, do you have evidence linking Mr. Hale to Mr. Carter's death?" "No, but I have evidence linking him to the theft of Mr. Carter's intellectual property, and I think that deserves investigation." Dr. Harmon nodded slowly. "Noted. You may step down." Claire returned to her seat. Zuri reached over and squeezed her hand. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Dr. Harmon called Silas Runn to testify. Silas walked to the witness table with the easy confidence of a man who'd never lost a fight. He wore a tailored suit and a patient smile. He swore his oath without hesitation. "Mr. Runn, Rentec Components supplied harness assemblies to Whitmore Dynamics for 3 years. During that time, were you aware of any quality control issues?" "Absolutely not. Our products meet or exceed all industry standards. We have documentation to support that. Documentation that Ms. Whitmore claims is falsified." Silas's smile thinned. "Ms. Whitmore is operating under intense pressure. Her company is struggling. She's looking for someone to blame." "Are you saying the thermal failures didn't occur?" "I'm saying that thermal failures can have many causes. User error, environmental factors, impropre installation. To blame Rentec without comprehensive analysis is irresponsible." Dr. Harmon leaned forward. "What about the warehouse? The one that burned last week?" "Federal investigators found crates of defective harnesses in that facility." "How do you explain that?" Silas didn't miss a beat. "That facility was operated by a third-party contractor. We leased space for overflow storage. If defective units were stored there, it was without our knowledge or approval. Convenient. It's the truth." Dr. Harmon shuffled her papers. "Thank you, Mr. Wren. You may step down." Silas stood, buttoning his jacket. As he walked past Claire, he smiled. Just a little. Just enough to say, "You can't touch me." Claire's jaw tightened, but she didn't look away. Finally, Dr. Harmon called Zuri to the stand. The room fell silent. Zuri walked forward, small and steady, her sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. She sat in the witness chair, and a clerk adjusted the microphone down to her height. Dr. Harmon's voice softened. Zuri, you understand you're under oath? Yes, ma'am. Can you tell us, in your own words, what happened when you first examined the harness that failed on Ms. Whitmore's truck? Zuri took a breath. I heard it. The engine was making a sound like it was choking. And when I looked, I smelled burnt plastic. The insulation had melted because the harness was routed too close to the heat shield. It was a design flaw. How did you know it was a design flaw and not a manufacturing defect? Because the routing was intentional. Someone drew it that way. And when I saw the manufacturer's stamp, it said Rentec. Did that mean something to you at the time? Not then. But later, when I was helping at the Whitmore plant, I saw the same pattern on the assembly line. And I noticed the quality reports had data that didn't make sense. Dr. Harmon leaned in. Can you explain that for us? Zuri pulled out a printed chart, one she prepared with Jace's help. She held it up so the cameras could see. This is a noise floor measurement. It shows random electrical interference during testing. But in Rentec's reports, the noise is exactly the same across 50 different tests. That's impossible. Noise is random, unless someone copied the same test result and changed the labels. One of the other regulators spoke up. How did you recognize that? My dad taught me to look for patterns. He said machines don't lie, but people do. And this was people lying. The simplicity of the statement cut through the room like a blade. Dr. Harmon made a note. Zuri, I need to ask you about what happened last week. You were taken from Cruise Auto and held at a warehouse. Can you tell us what happened? Zuri's hands tightened on the armrests. Nyla leaned forward in her seat, ready to intervene, but Zuri shook her head slightly. She could do this. Two men came to the garage. They said they wanted to talk about my scholarship. But when I said I didn't want it, they grabbed me and put me in a van. They took me to a warehouse. It was dark and it smelled like oil. They locked me in a room and told me to wait. Did they hurt you? No, but they scared me. What happened next? I found a maintenance console. I used it to create voltage spikes in the power grid. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. Morse code. SOS. I knew Ms. Whitmore's company monitored the grid, so I thought maybe someone would see it. Dr. Harmon blinked. You taught yourself to hack a power grid. I didn't hack it. I just used the tools that were there. My dad taught me how systems work. You don't need to break them to make them talk. A ripple of amazed laughter spread through the room. Even the regulator smiled. That's remarkable, Zuri. Thank you. Dr. Harmon glanced at her colleagues, then back at Zuri. One more question. Why did you get involved in all of this? You could have walked away after fixing Ms. Whitmore's truck. Why did you keep going? Zuri looked down at the notebook in her lap. Her dad's handwriting covered the pages, diagrams and notes and dreams he'd never seen realized. Because my dad couldn't finish what he started. And because if something's broken, you fix it. You don't just walk away and hope someone else does it. You fix it yourself. The room was silent. Dr. Harmon nodded. Thank you, Zuri. You've been very brave. Zuri stepped down and returned to her seat. Nyla wrapped an arm around her, and Marta squeezed her shoulder. Claire caught her eye and mouthed, Perfect. The hearing continued with more technical witnesses, but the emotional center had been Zuri's testimony. The little girl who spoke truth with clarity that no corporate lawyer could touch. Then, unexpectedly, Owen Hale's lawyer stood. Dr. Harmon, my client wishes to make a statement. Murmurs swept the room. Owen walked to the witness table, his face drawn and pale. He swore his oath and sat down. Mr. Hale, you're here voluntarily? Yes. Proceed. Owen took a breath. 4 years ago, Zuri Carter came to Whitmore Dynamics with a harness design. I was in that meeting. His idea was good. Better than good. It was brilliant, but it was complicated, and it would have required retooling our entire production line. I thought it was too expensive, too risky, so I turned him down. He paused, his voice shaking. 3 months later, Derek Pullman came to me. He said Rentec was interested in the design. He asked if I had the files. I gave them to him. I didn't think it mattered. Tarek had walked away. I thought the idea was dead. Did you receive any compensation from Rentec for providing those files? Owen hesitated. Yes. Consulting fees. $50,000 over 2 years. The room exploded again. Reporters scribbled furiously. Owen's lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear. Dr. Harmon raised her gavel. And when Rentec filed the patent? I didn't know. Not until recently. I swear. But you knew the design was stolen. Owen closed his eyes. Yes. And when Ms. Whitmore started investigating, you tried to protect Rentec. Yes. Why? Owen looked up, his face crumpling. Because I was scared. Because I'd taken their money and I didn't want anyone to know. Because I'm a coward. Silence. Dr. Harmon looked at him with something close to pity. Thank you for your honesty, Mr. Hale. However belated, Owen stood and walked out of the hearing, his career in ruins, his reputation destroyed. The regulators conferred quietly. Then Dr. Harmon addressed the room. Based on the testimony and evidence presented today, this panel recommends the following actions. 1. Rentec Components contracts with all federally regulated entities are suspended pending criminal investigation. 2. The Department of Justice will open an inquiry into the theft of intellectual property from Zuri Carter. 3. Whitmore Dynamics is cleared of liability in the recall, which is now classified as a proactive safety measure. She looked at Zuri. And 4. The Carter resonant loop harness design will be recognized as an open-source safety standard, available for licensing under terms set by the Carter family. The room erupted in applause. Zuri looked at Claire, tears streaming down her face. Claire smiled back, her own eyes wet. Outside, reporters swarmed. Zuri, Nyla, and Marta were escorted to a waiting car by Jace, who'd somehow procured a police escort. Claire stayed behind to answer questions, deflecting attention from Zuri and focusing on the company's next steps. But when the cameras finally turned away, Claire walked to her car alone, exhausted and relieved. Her phone buzzed. A text from Zuri. We did it. Thank you. Claire typed back. We did it together. You were amazing. She sat in her car for a long moment, watching the city lights flicker on as dusk fell. Somewhere in that city, a little girl who'd fixed a broken truck had just changed an entire industry. And Claire had been lucky enough to witness it. 6 months later, spring arrived early, bringing warmth and green shoots to the riverfront town where Zuri had spent her whole life. The trees along the county road bloomed with white flowers, and the air smelled like possibility. The Carter Innovation Wing stood at the north end of the Whitmore Dynamics campus, a gleaming building with floor-to-ceiling windows and a workshop visible from the street. The design was deliberate. Transparency, accessibility, a statement that innovation belonged to everyone. Zuri stood at the entrance, scissors in hand, a red ribbon stretched across the doorway. Cameras clicked, but this time she'd agreed to them. This wasn't exploitation. This was celebration. Nyla stood beside her, tears already streaming. Marta was there too, wearing a dress for the first time in anyone's memory, grumbling about it, but secretly pleased. Claire stood slightly behind them, content to let this moment belong to Zuri. Ready? Nyla asked. Zuri nodded and cut the ribbon. The crowd applauded as the doors opened. Inside, the workshop was filled with equipment, workbenches, and tools. But most importantly, it was filled with kids. 20 students from the local school district, ages 10 to 16, all selected because they'd shown aptitude for fixing things, building things, understanding things that most people overlooked. Zuri walked among them, shaking hands, answering questions. She wasn't nervous anymore. She'd testified in front of federal regulators and survived kidnapping. A room full of curious kids didn't scare her. One boy, maybe 12, raised his hand. Is it true you fixed a truck with a soda tap? Zuri laughed. Yeah, but I don't recommend it. Use the right parts when you can. What if you can't? Then you use what you have. My dad always said, the best tool is the one in your hand. The boy nodded, absorbing this wisdom like gospel. Claire watched from the doorway, a smile playing at her lips. She'd stepped down as CEO of Whitmore Dynamics 3 months ago, not because she was forced out, but because she'd found something better to do. She was now the director of Project Loop, a foundation dedicated to funding young inventors and ensuring that no brilliant idea died because someone couldn't afford to pursue it. The board had been shocked. The shareholders had been confused. But Claire had never been more certain of anything in her life. Marta joined her at the doorway. You did good, Whitmore. Zuri did good. I just got out of the way. Don't sell yourself short. You could have buried this. Most people would have. Claire shrugged. Most people didn't meet Zuri on the side of the road. Inside the workshop, Zuri gathered the students around a workbench. She held up a simple electric motor, the kind you could buy for $5 at a hobby shop. "Listen," she said, powering it on. The motor hummed, a software that filled the quiet room. "Hear that? That's a healthy motor. Now listen to this." She powered on a second motor, identical except for a bearing that had been deliberately worn down. The sound was different. A click, a stutter, a rhythm that felt wrong. "Can you hear the difference?" Hands shot up. Kids called out descriptions. "It's louder. It's uneven. It sounds sick." Zuri grinned. "Exactly. Machines talk. They tell you when something's wrong. You just have to learn their language." For the next 2 hours, she taught them how to listen, how to feel vibrations, how to smell overheating components. The sensory alphabet her father had taught her passed now to a new generation. When the workshop ended, parents arrived to pick up their kids. But most of them stayed, watching through the windows as Zuri walked among the workbenches, offering guidance, encouragement, and the kind of patience that could only come from someone who remembered what it felt like to be overlooked. That evening, a smaller gathering convened at Cruise Auto. The garage had been closed to customers, the lights dimmed except for strings of bulbs overhead. A table was loaded with food that Nyla and Marta had cooked, and folding chairs formed a loose circle. Jace was there, having driven down from the city. The Whitmore engineer, Sam Davis, showed up with her wife and a bottle of wine. A few of the plant workers Claire had protected during the recall came too, bringing gratitude and stories. And in the corner, on a workbench cleared for the occasion, sat the oscillator. Tarek's design, perfected and built, humming softly with the frequency that had started everything. Claire raised a glass. To Tarek Carter, and to Zuri, for finishing what he started. To Tarek and Zuri, the group echoed. Zuri ducked her head, embarrassed but pleased. Nyla kissed the top of her head. Later, as the party wound down, Zuri and Claire found themselves sitting on the hood of the old truck, the one that had broken down 6 months ago and changed everything. The night was cool, the stars scattered overhead like broken promises finally kept. "How does it feel?" Claire asked. "Weird. Good weird. But weird." "That's accurate." Zuri swung her legs, her heels tapping the bumper. "Do you think my dad would be proud?" "I think he'd be amazed. And proud. And probably a little terrified of how brave you are." Zuri smiled. "I'm not that brave. You stood up to people who wanted to silence you. You testified in front of the whole world. You finished work that grown men try to steal. Zuri, you're the definition of brave." Zuri was quiet for a moment. "I miss him. I know, but I hear him sometimes. In the engines. In the hum of the workshop. Like he's still teaching me." Claire's throat tightened. "Then he's still here. In the work. In you." Zuri looked up at the stars. "There's a lot of kids out there who are like me. Who fix things and nobody listens. That's why we built the center. So they have a place to be heard. It's not enough." Claire raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "We need more. More centers. More workshops. More people who believe in kids before they've proven anything." Zuri turned to Claire, her eyes fierce. "I want to build a whole network. Everywhere. So no kid ever has to wonder if their ideas matter." Claire stared at her, then started to laugh. "You're 10 years old, and you're already planning an empire. Is that bad?" "It's perfect." Claire slid off the hood and extended her hand. "Let's build it." Zuri shook her hand, solemn and serious, sealing a partnership that would last decades. Across town, in a federal prison, Owen Hale sat in a cell, awaiting trial for fraud and conspiracy. Silas Runn was in a cell 2 floors down, his charm and lawyers finally running up against consequences he couldn't buy his way out of. Rentec Components had filed for bankruptcy. The provisional patent had been invalidated, and Tara Carter's name was being added to the Engineering Hall of Fame, a posthumous honor that should have come while he was alive. Justice was slow and imperfect, but it was coming. A year after the hearing, Zuri stood on the same county road where she'd met Claire. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The old truck sat nearby, fully restored now, every wire and bolt in perfect condition. Claire stood beside her, hands in her pockets, watching the horizon. You ever think about that day? Claire asked. Every day. What do you think about? Zuri considered. I think about how you could have driven past. How you could have said no when I offered to help. How everything would be different if you had. But I didn't. No, you didn't. Zuri looked up at her. Why? Claire thought about it. Because you asked. And because something about the way you asked made me believe you. That's it. That's everything. They stood in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon. The truck's engine sat quiet, but Zuri could hear it in her mind, the rhythm and harmony of mechanics working exactly as they should. Ready to go? Claire asked. Yeah. They climbed into the truck, Zuri in the passenger seat, her dad's notebook on her lap. Claire turned the key, and the engine purred to life, flawless and strong. As they drove down the county road toward town, Zuri rolled down the window and let the wind rush in. She closed her eyes and listened to the hum of the engine, the whisper of the tires, the symphony of motion that her father had taught her to hear. And in that moment, surrounded by sound and speed and the promise of tomorrow, Zuri knew exactly what her dad would say if he were there. You did it, kiddo. You fixed everything that mattered. She opened her eyes and smiled. Behind them, the sun disappeared completely, and the stars came out one by one. The road stretched ahead, dark and uncertain, but full of possibility. And somewhere in the hum of the engine, in the frequency of the wires, in the resonant loop that connected past to future, Zuri Carter's voice whispered one last time. Listen before you fix. Understand before you build. And never let anyone tell you your ideas don't matter. Zuri whispered back, soft enough that only the wind could hear. I won't, Dad. I promise. The truck rolled on into the night, carrying two people who'd been strangers 6 months ago and were now something more. Not quite family, but not quite friends either. Something new. Something built from broken parts and second chances. Something that, like the best machines, would run forever if you just took the time to listen. If a 10-year-old girl could stand up to billionaires and criminals to finish her father's dream, what broken thing in your life are you walking past instead of fixing? If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more true tales of courage that prove ordinary people can do extraordinary things.